Joining me now is our national editor, our political editor, Andrew Clennell, here at State Parliament, your old stopping ground, I might say.
Yeah.
Not much has changed. A few premiers have changed, though. It's interesting to see just the movements and the energy around this place this morning. Dominic Perrottet is a shoo-in, you'd have to say, this morning. But Rob Stokes is going to ensure that this is not just a factional deal done by power brokers. He wants people, even though it is a secret ballot, to put their name to it.
Yeah, and he might be embarrassed by that decision. He could end up with 6 votes. I guess out of the 43 or so votes, he wants 10, ideally, Rob Stokes, so that he puts in a decent showing. But there's no doubt Perrottet is in the box seat. And it's interesting, he's 39, as you point out. People like Mike Baird, Christina Keneally, Nathan Rees-Mogg, 42, 43. Barry O'Farrell was in his 50s when he got the job. Gladys Berejiklian and Mike Baird in their 40s, early to mid-40s. Now we've got a 39-year-old. We've got the prospect of a deputy being about 37, a treasurer in Matt Kean as part of this deal being around 37. Yeah. And no real women around that leadership team. Such a stark contrast to Gladys. And a criticism of Gladys Berejiklian is she didn't really promote women in her cabinet. All the women in her cabinet were nationals, by and large, save for 1 or 2. So it's a dramatic change, but Dominic Perrottet does have some name recognition. He's unlike, he would have higher name recognition here in New South Wales than a lot of federal politicians. And I think you can pin that to the pandemic. I really think the pandemic, as we know, has really lifted the profile of state politicians. It's interesting to see Andrew Constance look to go federal. Perrottet had federal ambitions, Kean's had federal ambitions, Barilaro's had federal ambitions. And yet what we've seen from the pandemic is the state guys are in charge. So you wonder why they all want to go to Canberra, Laura.
Yeah, that's right. Well, perhaps they've realised now, except for Andrew Constance, obviously, that the power base, the real power is here in New South Wales. Dominic Perrottet has been pretty relaxed over the last couple of days, at least publicly. To see the factional dealing going on behind the scenes, I mean, it was frantic from what I can see from an outsider looking at the last 2 days. But Dominic Perrottet, I saw it with my own eyes, arrived here at about 7:30 this morning. He didn't say much, but this is what he did say.
We'll see how it goes. I'll put the trust in the party room to make the decision.
Confident you'll be the next premier?
We'll see how it goes. Thanks a lot.
There you go, we'll see how it goes. And I guess that's all he can say going into a vote like this. But just give us an idea, Andrew, of the factions, because as factional deals go, often they don't make sense to the public. So you can't really marry logic with factional deal making. I think in the end, they've probably arrived at a position that makes most sense to the public, but it wasn't always that way. You know, on Friday it was very different to Saturday morning, and then that late deal on Sunday afternoon with Stuart Ayres and Dominic Perrottet. And it does make sense because you've got a North Shore and a Western Sydney MP, and really to win elections you need a combination like that. Well,
that's the argument, but who knows who the Deputy Liberal leader is typically? And he's not even going to be Treasurer, Stuart Ayres. And Gladys Berejiklian and Dom Perrottet were both from the North Shore. So I feel that Perrottet is spinning this Western Sydney thing a bit to be able to land the deal. And what apparently happened was he was quite panicked on Friday night that he might fall short, even though there was a view in the moderates that he had certainly the Kean camp, he had the numbers. So he effectively double-crossed Matt Kean, although he's still going to be Treasurer out of it, because for a long time it's been a Perrottet-Kean ticket. And you can see what a political operator Dominic Perrottet is, because I believe, or have believed for a few months, there was a bit of a Perrottet-Stokes arrangement being talked about as well.
Wow.
Perrottet very keen to get this job, obviously, and look, he's shown himself as articulate and relaxed, but from what I hear, Laura, on Friday night he was much less relaxed. He just thought it would be a lot easier. And it's an interesting show of faith by Matt Kean to provide as many as 14 votes from the moderate bloc for him, 10 to 14, and yet his ambition of being Deputy Liberal leader has been thwarted by his old mate Stuart Ayres. They say they're mates in here, but they never are.
Yeah, no, there's that old adage, dog in politics, all of that. Now, what are we going to see from Dominic Perrottet, his first act as Premier? You know, he is known as the guy who argued around the crisis cabinet table to open up earlier. And look, I always think you need that kind of healthy, competitive, competing views around a cabinet table, and I think it has put New South Wales in good stead. But Gladys Berejiklian was there pulling the brakes, as were others.
Yeah.
So what does he do as his first act as Premier? Does he forge his path, or does he reach out to those who are concerned that he might be moved too fast and find somewhere in the middle?
Well, I don't know, but I do find it interesting he hasn't ruled out bringing the opening forward. But how much can you really do? It's only 2 or 3 days. So even if he does that, it's kind of almost a stunt in my view. It's just a political statement. But you raise a good point about his role in those crisis cabinet committee meetings, because he and Kerry Chant were almost at war at times. And now they have to work hand in glove, supposedly. So how's Kerry Chant going to be able to deal with that? And Perrottet, even before there was vaccination, had a belief, not let it rip as been portrayed, but what Scott Morrison originally said, which is you make sure your hospitals have enough capacity, but you let the virus run in the community in small numbers. So that was his philosophy. I think in one crisis cabinet meeting, he said to Kerry Chant, I'm behind 40-0, or Treasury's behind 40-0 against you here, Kerry. And there have been other comments attributed to him, including that she take a pay cut.
This is Don Harwin arriving live at Parliament. Let's see if he says anything. Nope.
Don Harwin has always been... Here we go.
Are you hoping to hold on to your portfolio?
He's been a keen... he's been an important power broker in the moderates. And he, I think, was wavering after Gladys Berejiklian's resignation between Stuart Ayres as a potential leader and Perrottet. But he finally found himself with the Perrottet-Kean team, and his decision in these matters carries a few numbers with it. So
yeah, it certainly does.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at the numbers. So 23 gets it today. Look, there's a lot of bluff and bluster around before these kinds of votes. The highest watermark for Stokes is looking like 17, which doesn't get him there anyway. The lowest, perhaps between 3 and 6. He'll be hoping to get into double digits. But, you know, at this point, who knows? But these secret ballots aren't as secret as you think they would be, are they? And also today, we don't know whether Gladys Berejiklian is going to be here. I was told last night that she would be. This morning I'm hearing that she won't be, but no one will officially confirm that. And then you've got 44 people voting all up. So Gareth Board, Gladys and John Sidoti won't be here today. So that's 23 to win.
Yeah, and look, I'd heard this morning Gladys Berejiklian wasn't attending either. It's interesting to contrast it with when Barry O'Farrell resigned after he misled the Commission over a gift of Grange to his home. He turned up for the vote for Mike Baird, but he ended up saying to Gladys Berejiklian, I didn't resign so Baird could get up. He was mad at Gladys Berejiklian.
Right. And
Mike Baird said in that start of the party room, well, I think Barry should nominate. He actually made that gesture, and O'Farrell said, no, I'm out of here. So I guess if Gladys Berejiklian doesn't show up, we won't see similar scenes to that. And I guess she'd take herself away from the centre of attention. But as I understand it, she's still dealing with the events of Friday.
Yeah, quite traumatic events for her. And it's been interesting to see the reaction to her resignation, hasn't it? I think two things can be right. I think that after a pandemic of 2 years in which the public of New South Wales has seen her every day, if you're not in and around politics all the time, you would probably be shocked by that resignation. But on the other side, as you've talked about, she did not really have any choice. She set the standard and she had to go. And to stay there, just having stood aside, we know that how that works. Some have tried to do that in the past and then it's death by 1,000 cuts. But for her party to move on today, wouldn't it have been a good idea for her to address the party in private in a last kind of show of unity?
Yeah, perhaps. But look, I just think she has bigger issues. In that O'Farrell scenario, he'd kind of given the evidence and fallen on his sword.
This is not over for her.
This is not over for her. She's got to give the evidence. I mean, that first ICAC hearing a year ago, it seemed clear that Maguire was telling her on the phone about some of the business dealings he shouldn't have been doing while an MP. And then he resigned in 2018 as an MP because he was played on a phone tap trying to get a cut from a developer. And she never used that information to go into ICAC, which is a legal requirement. So the fact, when she remained last year, I felt, Laura, she almost played a game of dare or bluff with the corruption watchdog and said, get me if you can, really. And I guess they had two options. They could have just released the report on Daryl Maguire and criticised her, because they would have had to do that, but not found against her. Or they could continue pursuing the investigation and launch an investigation into her. And that's what we have. And I'm sure a lot of people will be watching on Sky when the hearings occur in a couple of weeks to find out what the ICAC has on Gladys Berejiklian.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will coincide with the 80% of Freedom Day in New South Wales too. Andrew, I just did ask the question, is Gladys Berejiklian going to be here today, to one of her staffers, and the reply just came, nope. So I think that satisfies it. Absolutely not. She will not be here today.
I think most people could understand that.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, if she's saying she's departing politics, she's departing politics. And frankly, I couldn't believe the stories yesterday suggesting a federal move. I mean, federal election within 6 to 9 months, it's just fanciful. Yeah, ICAC, the process takes a lot longer than that, and they've hardly called her on as a person of interest if it's all going to be plain sailing for her.